There is a sacred work appointed to you, not by man nor by circumstance, but by the Eternal Himself. You have been sent clothed in flesh, not to wander aimlessly through the shadows of life, but to reveal His glory. And tonight I say to you, act as though you are on a mission from God, and watch the whole world bend itself to serve that holy purpose. It is God who works in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure. Let those words sink deeply into you, for they contain the very secret of life. Not in the sky above, not in the winds or waves, but in you. In this very moment, as you sit listening, the Eternal is moving, shaping, willing, and acting through the thoughts and desires that rise within you. The Scripture does not say that God works outside of you, or through the machinery of the world, but in you, both to will and to do. To will meaning the stirring of desire, and to do meaning the power to bring forth its fulfillment. Now many hear these words and pass them by, thinking them poetic, but let us pause. If it is God who works in you both to will and to do, then every longing you feel, every desire that burns in your heart and refuses to die, is not your private fantasy but the whisper of the divine. You may think it is small, you may dismiss it as selfish, but I tell you that hidden within that desire is the will of heaven. The Eternal is not far off, commanding from some high throne. The Eternal has clothed Himself in your own flesh and blood, and He moves in you as the very feeling of, I wish. Think of the child who longs to paint, who spends every idle moment sketching upon scraps of paper, while the family tells him to focus on practical things. Yet the desire persists. He cannot shake it off. He goes to bed thinking of colors. He wakes with visions of form and light. Where did that come from? Did the boy invent it? No, it was planted within him as a seed, and the seed carries within itself the power to fulfill what it declares. For Scripture says God both wills and does. He is not content to give you the longing, He is also the one who brings it to pass. Consider how marvelous this is. If you see desire as something separate from God, you will always battle against it, thinking it wrong or foolish. But if you see it as the stirring of the Eternal within you, then you treat it as holy. You nourish it, you honor it, you protect it from the winds of doubt. For when you feel a great longing for a better life, for freedom, for abundance, for expression, that is the Eternal knocking at the door of your consciousness. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in. What is this knocking if not the sudden appearance of desire? And what is opening the door if not accepting it, embracing it, and saying, yes, this is mine, this is holy, this is the Eternal moving in me. Let me tell you of a woman who, in the midst of hardship, felt the longing to live in a home of her own, free from debt and struggle. She dismissed it at first. Her relatives told her it was impossible. Her friends laughed at the thought, pointing to her circumstances. Yet night after night, the desire returned, gentle but insistent. She finally said, this is not foolishness, this is sacred. This is God willing in me. So she began to honor the vision. Each evening before sleep, she walked through the halls of her imagined home. She placed her hand upon the doorknob, felt the wood beneath her touch, arranged the furniture in her mind, heard the laughter of guests in the dining room. She was faithful to this inner walk. Months later, through channels she could not have devised, the opportunity came. A distant relative left her an inheritance, precisely enough to purchase the very type of home she had seen. And when she stepped into it for the first time in waking reality, it was as though she had always lived there. Now, was that chance? Was it coincidence? Or was it the law revealed in Scripture? God working in her to will and to do. She had felt the will, she had honored it, and she had allowed the doing to unfold. For the world is but the shadow cast by the unseen movements of consciousness. Do you remember the words, delight yourself also in the Lord, and He shall give you the desires of your heart? The old translators often render this as though God gives you what you ask for if you delight in Him. But the deeper meaning is this: when you delight in the awareness of being, when you rest in the holy truth that God indwells you, then even the desires that arise in you are His gifts. He gives you the desire itself, and then He gives you the fulfillment. You are never the beggar, you are always the vessel through which the Eternal expresses Himself. But many say, if God is the one who works in me, why do I fail so often? The answer is simple: because you separate yourself from the desire. You see it as foreign, as improbable, as outside your reach. You reject it, or you allow fear to choke it. You say, that cannot be for me. And so you shut the door. Remember, God knocks, but He does not force His way in. You must open. To open is to accept. To open is to feel that the longing is already fulfilled. To open is to say in your heart, this is mine now. Take the example of the young man who longed to write. His family wished him to follow the path of business, to take up a profession they deemed secure. But the urge to write was too strong. He felt it in the stillness of night, in the quiet of morning, even in the middle of his studies. At last he embraced it. He acted as though his mission was divine. He set aside time each day to write, even when no one paid him, even when the world gave no applause. He wrote as one chosen. And what happened? In time, doors opened. His words found their way to publishers. His books were read. His name was known. But more than the outer success, he lived with the deep assurance that he was doing the very thing God had sent him to do. And you, what do you long for? What persistent vision has followed you through the years? It is not by accident. It is not mere chance. It is the Eternal declaring His will in you. That is why it does not leave you. That is why it presses itself upon your heart even when you try to silence it. To deny it is to deny the life of God in you. To accept it is to walk in harmony with the divine plan. Remember the story of Moses, who heard the call at the burning bush. He said, "Who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh?" He doubted as you doubt. Yet the voice declared, "Certainly I will be with you." And what was that presence but the feeling of being itself? The I am that spoke through him was the guarantee. So it is with you. The voice of doubt says, "Who am I to pursue this dream? Who am I to walk as though chosen?" And the Eternal answers, "I am with you." That presence in you is the sufficiency. When you recognize this, you no longer measure yourself by outer circumstances. You do not say, "I cannot for I lack the money, the education, the opportunity." You say, "The one who stirs this desire in me is also the one who fulfills it. Therefore I walk as though it were already done." That is faith. And faith is simply loyalty to unseen reality. Here again the words, "It is God who works in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure." His good pleasure! Not His reluctant tolerance, not His begrudging allowance, but His pleasure. The longing you feel is His joy in expression. He delights to live through you. He delights to clothe Himself in your accomplishments. He delights to shine in your victories. And you, by honoring your desires, are bringing to earth the pleasure of heaven. One might say, "But surely some desires are selfish, are they not?" I tell you this, the desire that persists, the desire that is noble, the desire that carries with it joy and life, that is sacred. Yes, there are fleeting whims that vanish, but the true desire endures. It returns again and again. It survives disappointment. It is not easily silenced. That is the mark of its divinity. And even if it seems selfish in the eyes of others, if it leads you to fuller life, to greater joy, to richer expression, it will in turn bless many. For no man lives unto himself alone. The cup that overflows in you refreshes all who drink of it. Think of the man who longed for wealth, not for the mere hoarding of it, but because he felt within him the call to live freely, to create, to give. He was told he should be content with little, that to seek wealth was greed. Yet the desire did not leave him. He honored it, assumed it, lived nightly in the feeling of already possessing it. In time the channels opened. He prospered. And out of that prosperity he gave, he built, he blessed many. What had once seemed selfish revealed itself as service. For by honoring the will of God in him, he became the channel of God's blessing to others. You see, you are not to judge the desire by the standards of the world. You are to test it inwardly. Does it persist? Does it bring joy even in the imagining? Does it enlarge you? Then it is holy. Then it is divine. And to deny it is sin, for sin is simply missing the mark, failing to express the fullness of God within. So tonight, I urge you to listen inwardly. What is the desire that knocks at the door of your heart? Do not dismiss it. Do not call it impossible. Say rather, this is God willing in me, and he who wills also does. Rest in that assurance. Walk as one chosen. Act as though your mission were divine, for truly it is. And the whole world, though it may resist at first, must in the end yield to the eternal plan moving through you. The Lord is simple, yet its simplicity often causes men to overlook it. Consciousness is the only reality, and the assumption you hold within yourself determines the shape and character of your world. When you hear it said that faith moves mountains, this is not a poetic exaggeration, but a practical truth. The mountain is nothing more than the fixed belief in your own limitations, and faith is the inner act of assuming that what you long for is already yours. You have been told to act as though, to live as though, and many take this lightly, imagining it to be pretense. But it is no pretense, it is the one creative power in the universe moving through you. To act as though you are chosen, as though your steps are divinely ordered, is to plant the seed of certainty in the soil of consciousness. The world outside is nothing but a mirror, and if the reflection displeases you, it is because you have not yet assumed the state you truly desire. The law is this: whatever you consent to as true within yourself, you will one day meet in the world without. Consent is the acceptance of a new inner state. Consent is feeling the wish fulfilled, regardless of appearances. Think of the man who desired freedom from debt. He had struggled for years, laboring under the weight of bills and obligations. Each day he looked at his accounts, and each day they mocked him. But one night, he heard within himself the quiet command to assume what he longed for. Instead of going to bed rehearsing his worries, he began to imagine what it would be like to live free. He felt the joy of receiving a letter stamped, paid in full. He heard a friend congratulating him, saying how wonderful it must feel to owe nothing at all. Though he had not a single coin to spare, he persisted in that assumption. Weeks passed, and outwardly nothing seemed to change. But inwardly he walked as one free. He spoke as though already released. He carried himself with the quiet assurance of a man no longer bound. Then, suddenly, from sources he could not have devised, provision came. A forgotten investment matured, an opportunity presented itself, and the debts were cleared in a moment. He had assumed the state, and the state created the fact. The world would call this coincidence, but nothing is coincidence. It is the outpicturing of consciousness. This is why the Master said, when you pray, believe that you have received, and you shall have. Notice the order. Not believe after you have received, but believe you have already received, and then the world must conform. The belief precedes the fact, for the fact is only the shadow of belief. You must therefore be very watchful of what you assume in secret. The outer world is not to blame, it is but the echo of your inner consent. If you assume yourself defeated, if you walk as one burdened, if you continually dwell in thoughts of lack, then the world must mirror lack and defeat. But if you assume the dignity of one sent on a divine mission, if you carry within you the feeling that your way is prepared, that the universe itself bends to serve your purpose, then you shall meet in the world men and women, events and circumstances that confirm your assumption. Do not say, I will wait until the evidence appears. That is to invert the law. The evidence will never appear first. It must be claimed within. You must dare to feel yourself already in possession of what you seek. You must dare to walk in the end. If you desire health, then feel the joy of vitality, the freedom of movement, the laughter of a body whole. If you desire abundance, then feel the satisfaction of plenty, the gratitude of having, the ease of one who never questions supply. If you desire love, then feel the warmth of companionship, the delight of being chosen, the peace of union. Whatever the desire, the law remains unchanged. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist until it hardens into fact. A woman once came to me with tears, saying she longed for reconciliation with her husband who had left her. She spoke of her sorrow, her loneliness, her despair. I told her, do not dwell in what is. Create within you what ought to be. She thought I was asking her to deceive herself, but she tried. Each night she imagined her husband beside her, speaking tenderly, holding her hand. She felt the ring on her finger, not as memory but as present reality. She whispered words of love and heard them returned. This she did faithfully, and after weeks her husband, without her reaching out, wrote to her. He confessed he had never stopped thinking of her, and in time they were reconciled. The assumption created the fact. Now, I do not tell you these things to entertain you with stories. I tell you because you too are called to practice the law. You must not be a hearer only, but a doer. For it is written, be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. To be a hearer is to nod in agreement, to admire the teaching. To be a doer is to enter into the inner state and live in it. Imagine a playwright who writes a drama. He holds in his mind the characters, the dialogue, the conclusion. The actors then embody his vision, and the play unfolds. But the audience only sees the outward play. You are both playwright and actor. You write the script in imagination, and then you step upon the stage of the world to act it out. If you write tragedy within, do not be surprised if you play tragedy without. But if you write triumph, if you pen joy, if you script abundance, then the world will faithfully stage your drama. One man, longing for success in business, began each night to walk into an office in imagination. He saw his name upon the door, he felt the solid desk beneath his hands, he heard the hum of employees, he smelled the ink and paper. Though he was at that time unemployed and without resources, he lived in the assumption nightly. Months passed and opportunities opened. He was offered a partnership, then later full ownership, in precisely the type of business he had imagined. The inner assumption had drawn to him the outer fact. You must understand this is not daydreaming. Daydreaming is idle. Assumption is creative. Daydreaming wishes without faith. Assumption feels the reality of the fulfilled desire. One is passive, the other active. One dissipates energy, the other concentrates it. You may sit for hours daydreaming of what might be, but if you do not enter the feeling of its reality, it will fade away like smoke. Yet if, even for a few minutes, you assume the reality of your desire with conviction, you set in motion the unseen forces that will shape the world. Do not concern yourself with how it will come. That is not your part. The law cares for the means. Your part is to assume and persist. The bridge of incident will carry you across. You may think it chance, you may think it unexpected, but it is the law fulfilling itself. For consciousness creates, and the outer world is but the print of the inner mold. Remember the words, call those things which be not as though they were, and they shall become. To call is to assume. To speak as though already true is to plant the seed. You do not dig up the seed to see if it grows. You rest knowing the life within it will unfold. So too with your assumptions. Plant them in faith, water them with feeling, guard them with persistence, and they will blossom in time. There is no power outside of consciousness. The government, the market, the neighbor, the stranger, they are all instruments. They cannot act except as your assumption permits. When you assume, you set the stage, and every player enters to fulfill the script. If you assume rejection, you will meet those who reject you. If you assume welcome, you will meet those who embrace you. The outer is powerless without the inner consent. Therefore, act as one divinely sent. Walk with the quiet dignity of one who knows his mission is sure. Let others see in you the confidence of one whose steps are guided. Not arrogance, but assurance, not pride, but faith. For the eternal is in you, both willing and doing. And to assume that you are chosen is not presumption, it is truth. The only presumption is to deny it, to live as though you are an accident, tossed about by forces beyond your control. But you are not an accident, you are purpose made flesh, you are will clothed in form. You are desire walking the earth. When you embrace this, when you assume the inner state of fulfillment, you align yourself with the deepest law of being. Then all things must conspire for your good. The law is perfect and impartial. It does not reward the worthy and punish the unworthy. It simply reflects assumption. Just as the mirror shows no preference, but reflects what stands before it, so the world reflects the state you occupy. If you dislike the reflection, do not strike the mirror. Change the man who looks into it. Assume a new state and the reflection must alter. So tonight, examine your assumptions. What are you secretly consenting to? What state do you occupy? Are you living as one on a mission from God or as one abandoned? Do you carry yourself as fulfilled or as lacking? For the law will not fail. The outer must conform to the inner, and the world, though vast and complex, is nothing more than the echo of your own assumption. Close your eyes for a moment, not in idle relaxation, but with the full intent of entering a world greater than the one before your senses. For imagination is the workshop of eternity, and the scenes you fashion there are the seeds from which your tomorrow must grow. Every vision you accept as real in the silence of your mind is a prophecy of the life you are destined to live. If you would change the outer world, you must first change the inner scene. You cannot reap a harvest of joy while sowing images of sorrow. You cannot live in abundance while dwelling nightly upon lack. The law demands that the inner pattern be set before the outer form can appear. Now, let me guide you. Imagine yourself tonight standing in the midst of the life you desire. If it is freedom you long for, feel what freedom means to you. Do not make it vague, for vagueness brings only shadowy results. Let it be real. Do you walk differently when you are free? Do your shoulders relax? Does your breath deepen? Does your voice take on a new confidence? Capture that feeling and clothe yourself in it. Perhaps you long for companionship. Then hear the voice of another calling your name with love. Feel the warmth of a hand in yours. Smell the faint fragrance of presence beside you. Do not think of it as coming, live in it as now. If your heart longs for wealth, then count in imagination the crisp notes, hear the bank teller addressing you with respect, feel the joy of writing a check without fear. Do this with such vividness that you persuade yourself it is already done. The world will tell you that imagination is fantasy, but I declare to you it is creation. What you imagine with feeling must one day become fact. Remember the words of the prophet. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Vision is not the ability of the eyes but of the heart. It is the inner sight that beholds what the eyes cannot yet see. And blessed is the man who walks not by sight, but by vision, for to him the unseen is more real than the seen. Let me share with you the story of a man who longed for a change in his career. He was weary of endless toil with little reward. He began each night to sit quietly and imagine himself in a fine office, hearing the hum of busy workers, feeling the weight of importance in his position. He heard the phone ring and answered with the confidence of authority. He saw his name on the door, etched in bold letters. At first it felt unreal, for his waking hours told a different story. But he persisted. He said within himself, though the outer world denies it, in my vision it is real. After weeks of this nightly practice, he was called by an acquaintance and offered a position in a company that was precisely what he had envisioned. The inner act had created the outer fact. Do not think this is peculiar to a few, it is the universal law. One woman, longing for reconciliation with her estranged sister, began to imagine nightly that she heard her sister's voice on the telephone, speaking in affection. She heard the laughter, the tender words, and she responded inwardly. In a short time, the phone did ring, and the voice she had heard in vision was now speaking in the outer world. They were reconciled not by effort or pleading, but by the simple act of assuming the union in imagination. When you engage in these inner scenes, do not make them elaborate. Keep them simple, for the power lies not in complexity, but in the intensity of feeling. One short scene, repeated until it feels natural, is more powerful than hours of wandering fancies. If you desire a new home, then take a simple act, lying in bed in the new place, turning the key in the door, or looking out the window at the view. Enter into that act until it feels real, and repeat it nightly. The moment it feels natural, it is done, though the outer evidence may take time to appear. Do not be discouraged if nothing happens at once. The seed does not sprout the moment it touches the soil. There is always an interval between assumption and manifestation. That interval is the law's way of arranging the play of life to bring your vision into fact. Trust it. Persist. For faith is nothing more than loyalty to the unseen reality. Remember how Jacob, when blessing his sons, spoke words that painted pictures of their future. He was not speaking of what was but of what must be. He declared, "Judah, thy hand shall be on the neck of thine enemies." He saw beyond the present and spoke the vision, and so it was fulfilled. Your imagination is your prophecy. Whatever picture you hold in the stillness of night, if you feel it real, you have spoken a blessing upon yourself, and the world will rearrange itself to make it fact. Many will say, "But my imagination wanders. I cannot hold it steady." I say to you, train it as you would a child. When it runs astray, gently bring it back. Do not scold yourself. Persist in bringing it again and again to the vision you have chosen. In time it will obey. Just as a river carves its course by persistence, so your mind will take the groove of your repeated assumption. There was once a man who longed to be healed of a lingering illness. The doctors gave him little hope, but he turned inward. Each night he imagined himself rising from bed with vigor, walking strongly, feeling the air in his lungs with ease. He did this until it felt natural, and though the doctors could not explain it, in time his body conformed to the vision. Health returned, not because he struggled for it, but because he had already accepted it in imagination. The vision you hold must be felt as now. If you place it always in the future, it remains there. Someday I will be wealthy, someday I will be loved, someday I will be free. That day never comes, for tomorrow is forever tomorrow. But if you dare to say, "It is now. I have it now. I live in it now," then it crystallizes. For consciousness is always now. There is no other time. The past and future are but shadows. The only substance is this moment of being. The law was declared when it was said, "Let the weak say, I am strong." Do not wait to become strong before you claim strength. Claim it now, in imagination. Speak as though it were already yours. Feel it until it takes root. The world must then reflect it, for the world is compelled to bear witness to the inner confession. You may say, "But I do not know how it will come." You do not need to know. The how is not your concern. Your task is to assume the vision fulfilled. The means will appear. The bridge of incident will form beneath your feet. It may come by ways you never dreamed, through people you never met, in places you never thought to look. But come it must, for imagination, once accepted as reality, creates its own path to manifestation. Think of Joseph, who dreamed of his brothers bowing to him. The dream was ridiculed, resisted, even punished. Yet in the end, the dream proved stronger than circumstance, and every detail unfolded. Your dream may be mocked. You may be told it is impossible. But if you hold it with feeling, if you walk in it within, then the world must in time confirm it. I tell you, there is no power in heaven or earth that can prevent the vision you hold in faith from becoming fact. For imagination is God in action. The voice that says, "Let there be," is none other than the vision you dare to feel as real. And just as the word of creation did not return void, but accomplished what it was sent to do, so your inner word, clothed in feeling, cannot return to you empty. So tonight, do not go to sleep in the state of your problems. Do not rehearse the difficulties of the day. Enter into the vision of the fulfilled desire. Walk through the halls of your new home. Embrace the loved one. Feel the weight of the gold in your hand. Hear the song of freedom. Let that be the last act before sleep, for in that state the vision sinks deep into the subconscious, where it takes root and grows unseen. Then, when you rise in the morning, carry yourself as one who has already received. Speak little of your desire to others, but feed it within. For the secret place of the Most High is imagination, and he that dwells there abides under the shadow of the Almighty. Consider for a moment the prophet who stood on a barren mountain, looking out at a sky without a cloud, at a land cracked and thirsty from years without rain. To the natural eye there was nothing, no sign, no hope, no evidence that his word would come to pass. Yet he declared with certainty, "I hear the sound of abundance of rain." He was not deceived, he was living in the unseen reality. The state of answered prayer had been assumed, and because the state was real within him, the fact had to follow. Long before the first cloud appeared, long before the drops fell, he knew it was already done, and so he sent his servant again and again to look, until finally the smallest sign appeared. A cloud no bigger than a man's hand. That was enough, for the state precedes the fact. This is the great truth of life. The outer world always conforms to the inner state. To change what you experience, you must change the state you occupy within. It cannot be otherwise. The world is a mirror, and if the reflection displeases you, do not fight with the mirror, but change the face that looks into it. To wait for the mirror to show you a new image before you change your expression is folly. Yet this is what most men do. They say, "When fortune smiles, I will feel happy. When love comes, I will feel complete. When health is restored, I will rejoice." But the law is reversed. First feel the joy, the love, the health within, then the mirror must reflect it without. Let us take an illustration. A man weary of his humble position longed for recognition and promotion. Each day he complained of his superiors, resented his low pay, envied those above him. He thought that by dwelling on these things he was being realistic. But reality is not what the senses report. Reality is what consciousness assumes. As long as he lived in the state of bitterness and lack, the facts of life faithfully echoed it. Then he heard that to change his life, he must first change his inner state. That night, instead of rehearsing his grievances, he imagined receiving congratulations from a colleague. He heard the words, "Well deserved." He felt the handshake. He sensed the weight of responsibility upon him. He persisted in this state night after night until it began to feel natural. In a short time, circumstances shifted. A vacancy opened, his name was put forward, and the promotion came. The outer fact simply conformed to the inner state he had already assumed. You see, the outer is powerless without the inner. Many think that effort, hard labor, and struggle bring results. Yet how often do men labor all their lives, only to remain in the same condition? Struggle without a change of state is like rowing against the tide. But let a man assume the state of his desire, and even in stillness things move. The state draws to itself its own conditions. It attracts, it arranges, it compels. You need not scheme how it shall come. You need only remain faithful to the state. There is a story of a woman who lived in poverty, longing for abundance. She tried every scheme, every plan, and grew only more weary. One day she heard that the secret was not in effort, but in assumption. That night she lay down in her small, cold room and imagined herself in comfort. She felt the softness of fine sheets, the warmth of a fire, the ease of security. She did not know how such things could come, but she felt them as real. She persisted, and within months she was offered a position as companion to a wealthy woman who traveled widely. Her life was transformed. She did not force the fact, she assumed the state, and the fact followed. This is the meaning of those words, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The heart is imagination, the feeling nature of man. What he consents to there, he becomes. You may try to change the outer world without changing the state, but it will be labor in vain. The state precedes the fact as surely as the root precedes the flower. Do not be deceived by appearances. The senses report the present, but the state you occupy determines the future. If you look only at what is, you are bound to repeat it. But if you look within, assuming what ought to be, then you set in motion a change that no power can stop. The world will rearrange itself to mirror your inner conviction. A man once told me of his desire to leave his dreary employment and begin his own enterprise. He was bound by fear, thinking he lacked capital, connections, and ability. I said, do not concern yourself with the how. Assume the state of one already in possession. That night he imagined himself shaking hands with a partner, sealing an agreement. He saw the books, the ledgers, the busy office. He lived in that state nightly. Within a year, through a chance meeting, he was introduced to a man with the very resources he lacked. They formed a partnership, and the business flourished. The state had preceded the fact. This is why it is written, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is not a vague hope, it is the assumption of the unseen as though it were already visible. Substance is that which underlies and supports. When you assume the state, you give substance to what is not yet seen. The evidence appears later, but the reality was always the state. Think again of the sower. He plants a seed and does not see the flower at once. Yet he knows the flower is already contained within the seed. The soil, the water, the sunlight, all these are drawn to serve the hidden life within. So too when you assume a state, the people, the opportunities, the events are drawn to serve it. You need not strain, you need only plant the seed of assumption and rest in the certainty that the harvest will come. The world delights in telling you to face facts, but facts are only the outpicturing of past assumptions. If you continue to face them, you continue to create them. Do not face facts, create facts. Live in the state of the wish fulfilled, and the facts will follow. When the master healed, he did not look at the cripple and see infirmity, he saw him walking. He did not look at the blind and see darkness, he saw them seeing. He did not face facts, he created facts. He assumed the state, and the state became fact. A young woman, longing for marriage, once despaired of ever finding a partner. She looked at the facts, her age, her loneliness, her repeated disappointments. These she called reality. But when she learned that the state precedes the fact, she began to change her inner world. Each night she imagined herself wearing a ring, hearing her friends congratulate her, feeling the presence of her husband beside her. She persisted until it seemed natural. In less than a year, she met the man who became her husband. The world had simply obeyed her inner state. So I say to you, cease waiting for facts to change before you believe. Believe first, assume first, live first in the unseen reality, and the facts must follow. This is the great reversal. The senses say, see and you will believe. The law says, believe and you will see. The senses demand evidence before faith. The law demands faith before evidence. Choose this day whom you will serve. If you serve the senses, you will remain bound by what is. If you serve the law of assumption, you will create what ought to be. And when you assume, assume with feeling. A state without feeling is a shadow. Feeling is the life, blood of assumption. To say with the lips, I am free, I am wealthy, I am loved, means nothing if the heart denies it. But to feel it as though it were true, even in the face of denial, is to clothe it with substance. the state so felt will harden into fact. When a man learns that everything he experiences is but the outpicturing of the assumptions he holds within himself, he begins to understand that his only responsibility is to dwell faithfully in the state he desires to express. The world, with all its seeming complexities, responds not to effort or struggle, but to the quiet, unseen direction of consciousness. The greatest power given to man is the ability to imagine and to feel as though what is longed for is already accomplished. Once he masters this art of inner living, the outer life must fall into harmony with it, for there is no power in the universe that can resist the compelling force of a sustained assumption. Consider the man who goes to sleep nightly rehearsing the disappointments of the day, dwelling on his lack, his sickness, or his loneliness. He believes he is being honest, but in truth he is only perpetuating a state. The subconscious, which never sleeps, takes his nightly impressions and reproduces them with unwavering fidelity. He wakes to find more of the same, for he carried the seed of despair into the fertile soil of sleep, and the harvest appears in his waking world. Yet let the same man deliberately close his eyes and, just before sinking into slumber, surrender himself to a scene in which he is already the man he wishes to be, already in possession of the things longed for, already enjoying the life he desires. Though the outer world denies it, he falls asleep in the state of the wish fulfilled. The subconscious, receiving this impression, accepts it as true and begins to fashion circumstances that will one day clothe that inner reality in outer fact. The secret lies in the interval between wakefulness and sleep, that twilight state where the conscious mind grows quiet and the subconscious is most receptive. In that sacred moment, you can sow the seed of your future. If you impress upon yourself the feeling of the wish fulfilled at that point, the subconscious will accept it without argument and bring it forth into expression. Many men pray long prayers by day, filled with doubt and repetition, yet undo them each night by falling asleep in fear and anxiety. The true prayer is not the words uttered by the lips, but the feeling carried into the silence of sleep. A woman once told me of her desire to live in a beautiful home. Each day she looked at her poor surroundings and grew discouraged. She thought that wishing and longing were enough, but wishing changes nothing. When she learned to practice the art of assumption in sleep, her life altered. Each night, before drifting into slumber, she imagined herself walking through her desired home. She felt the texture of the walls. She ran her hands over the polished wood. She looked out of the windows onto a lovely garden. She persisted until the scene became vivid and natural. Within a year, through a chain of events she could never have devised, she was living in the very type of home she had imagined. She had impressed the state of possession upon her subconscious in the drowsy interval of sleep, and the outer world was compelled to conform. The key is not to force or to strain, but to yield. The subconscious accepts without effort. Just as a seed dropped into fertile soil does not struggle to grow, but unfolds quietly according to its nature, so too will your assumption, planted in the fertile soil of sleep, bring forth its own harvest. Yield to the feeling, surrender to the state, and let the unseen power within carry it to completion. In sacred writings it is said, "You shall not need to fight in this battle. Set yourselves, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord." To stand still does not mean to do nothing outwardly, but to rest inwardly in the certainty that the work is already finished. It is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled so completely that doubt and fear have no voice. When you rest in that state, you need not force events, for life itself will rearrange to match your inner conviction. Imagine a young man longing for companionship. Each night he despairs of being alone, and in that state he falls asleep. He awakens day after day to the same solitude, for he has impressed loneliness upon his subconscious. But if he learns the art of inner assumption, he may transform his life. Instead of rehearsing loneliness, he imagines the warmth of love beside him. He feels the presence of a companion. He hears the tender words spoken to him. He allows the joy of partnership to fill him. He carries this scene into sleep, and though the bed is empty, he rests in the state of companionship. Soon the outer world reshapes, and he meets the one who fulfills his desire. He did not create the partner by force. He attracted the experience by sustaining the inner state. Do not think that the world is moved by chance or by the will of others. Each man is surrounded by a world that is nothing more nor less than the projection of his assumptions. To one man the world is harsh and unyielding, to another it is friendly and rich with opportunity. What makes the difference? Not the outer circumstances, but the inner state each occupies. If you desire wealth, do not merely hope for it. Assume the state of wealth. Feel the security, the freedom, the ease that wealth brings. If you desire health, do not dwell on sickness. Assume the state of health. Feel the vitality, the energy, the strength of perfect well-being. If you desire success, do not entertain failure. Assume the state of success. Feel the recognition, the accomplishment, the satisfaction of your goal already achieved. It is a profound mistake to wait until the outer world gives you proof. Proof is always the echo, never the cause. The cause lies within, in the assumption you choose and sustain. A man who waits for proof will wait in vain, for he has reversed the law. It is as if the farmer should stand before the field, demanding a harvest before he sows the seed. Sow the seed first, and the harvest is inevitable. Assume the state first, and the fact must follow. There was a man burdened by debt, fearful of creditors, and oppressed by lack. Each night he fell asleep rehearsing his fears, and each morning he awoke to find them multiplied. When he learned the power of assumption, he changed his practice. Instead of reviewing his debts, he imagined himself free. He heard the words, "Your account is settled." He felt the relief of freedom. He experienced the joy of abundance. He carried this feeling into sleep until it became natural. Within a short time, unexpected opportunities opened to him, debts were paid, and abundance began to flow. The world had only reflected his inner state. The ancient teacher said, "When you pray, believe that you have received it, and you shall have it." Notice the command, believe that you have received it, not that you shall receive. The tense is present, not future. You must assume the state now, even before a single fact supports it. It may feel strange at first, for the senses deny it, but persist until it feels natural. That which feels natural becomes your reality, for the subconscious accepts the natural as true and expresses it outwardly. Think of the actor who takes on a role. At first the words and gestures may feel foreign, but as he rehearses, he enters more deeply into the part. Finally, he so identifies with it that he seems to become the character itself. So too with assumption. At first it may feel unreal to assume wealth when the purse is empty, or health when the body aches, or love when the heart is lonely. But persist in the assumption until it feels natural, until you so identify with it that it becomes your reality. Then the outer world will echo your inner role. Life will always prove you right, for it mirrors your conviction. If you assume poverty, the world will confirm it. If you assume abundance, the world will support it. If you assume sickness, the body will respond. If you assume health, the body will renew itself. There is no neutrality. Every moment you are occupying a state, and that state is shaping your world. The question is not whether you are assuming, but what you are assuming. And remember, assumption is not idle daydreaming. It is a deliberate act of imagination, clothed with feeling and sustained with faith. Idle wishing leaves a man as he is, but assumption transforms. The man who idly says, "One day I will be successful," remains as he is, for he assumes nothing. But the man who inwardly feels himself already successful, who imagines the scenes of success, who carries the conviction into sleep, is planting the seed of his future. There is a story told of a young student who longed to travel to distant lands but lacked the means. Each night, instead of despairing, he imagined himself boarding a ship, feeling the sway of the deck, smelling the salt air, hearing the cries of the gulls. He lived in that state until it seemed real. Within a year, he was offered an unexpected opportunity to join an expedition abroad. The world had simply rearranged to mirror his inner state. This is the way of all true creation. You create nothing by force, you create by assumption. The unseen state is the only reality. Facts are but shadows that follow. Occupy the state faithfully, especially in the sacred interval before sleep, and the facts must conform. Every great transformation begins not in the outer world, but within the secret chamber of the mind. The man who dares to shift his identity inwardly is the man who discovers that all outward change is simply the echo of what he has already assumed to be true. To become rich, to be abundant, to live in freedom, one does not first accumulate possessions or force circumstances. One first changes the conception he holds of himself. The wealth of the world does not begin in banks, in markets, or in business, but in consciousness. The one who grasps this principle realizes that money, success, and opportunity are not pursued. They are attracted by the state one occupies. It is written, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." This does not mean idle thoughts of the surface mind, which change from hour to hour, but the deep inner conviction, the sustained assumption of self. If a man sees himself as poor, as struggling, as undeserving, then no matter how hard he labors, the world will mirror that state. But if he begins to assume a different concept of self, if he inwardly sees himself as prosperous, capable, and free, then circumstances will inevitably rearrange to support that assumption. The world cannot resist the power of a changed identity, for the world is only the expression of identity. Let us take the example of a man who works tirelessly, yet remains in poverty. He may believe his condition is caused by the economy, by lack of education, or by the unfairness of life. Yet there are others, perhaps with fewer advantages, who rise to success. What distinguishes them? It is not chance, but the image of self each sustains. The man who works but secretly believes himself doomed to failure creates around himself the conditions of failure. Another man, working in the same place, yet inwardly convinced of his wealth and usefulness, attracts opportunities, promotions, and openings that lift him above his fellows. The difference is not in the work, but in the assumption. You can see this principle illustrated in many lives. There was once a woman who longed for financial freedom, yet she constantly affirmed that she was burdened, that money was scarce, that she could never get ahead. Her words and thoughts confirmed her identity, and so the world answered her faithfully with more scarcity. But when she learned to shift her self-concept, when she began to fall asleep nightly imagining herself already free, already enjoying abundance, already secure in wealth, the tide turned. Unexpected income appeared, opportunities opened, and new channels flowed into her life. She had not created wealth by struggle, she had changed her identity and allowed wealth to flow to her. To change identity is to put on a new state, like an actor assuming a role. At first it feels strange, for the senses contradict it, and the memory of the old self pulls strongly. Yet with persistence, the new assumption takes root. The actor rehearses until the part becomes natural, until he no longer pretends but is. Likewise, when you persist in assuming the identity of wealth, health, or love, it ceases to be imagination and becomes your natural state. The outer world, being but shadow, conforms itself to this inner reality. Many men misunderstand and think they must earn or deserve wealth. Yet wealth is not a reward, it is a state. To assume wealth does not mean to boast or to pretend outwardly, but to quietly accept inwardly that you are already the one you desire to be. The ancient teacher said, "When you pray, believe that you have received it, and you shall have it." To believe you have received is to assume the identity now, not in some distant future. It is to live inwardly in the state as though it were already fact. A young student once desired to start a business, yet he feared he lacked the capital and the connections. For months he hesitated, seeing only obstacles. When he learned this principle, he began to imagine himself as already successful. Each night he entered the state of having achieved it. He saw himself managing the business. He felt the satisfaction of success. He heard the congratulatory words of friends. Soon his hesitation vanished, and with new confidence he moved forward. Opportunities that had seemed closed began to open. Investors appeared, and within a year his business stood firm. He had not forced the world, he had changed himself. There is a law that cannot be broken. You can only receive what you are conscious of being. The world mirrors consciousness, not effort. If you would become rich, you must cease to identify as poor. If you would be free, you must cease to identify as bound. If you would be loved, you must cease to identify as unloved. Every state is available, but you must put it on by assumption. You cannot remain in one state and expect to experience another. This is why so many struggle in vain. They try to change circumstances while clinging inwardly to the same concept of self. They wish for wealth but still see themselves as struggling. They long for health but still call themselves sick. They desire recognition but still believe themselves unworthy. Until identity shifts, circumstances cannot. But the moment identity changes, the world follows with mathematical certainty. There was a man who for years called himself unlucky. Every venture failed, every opportunity slipped away. He told his friends that fate was against him. When he learned the secret, he was told, "Stop calling yourself unlucky. Begin now to assume that fortune is with you." At first he resisted, saying, "But it is not true. I have proof of failure." Yet he persisted, and each night before sleep he imagined himself telling others of his success. He felt the joy of things going well. Slowly the tide turned. A small opportunity succeeded, then another, until within a few years he was considered fortunate by all who knew him. He had not fought fate, he had changed identity. The power lies in the feeling of reality. Words without feeling are powerless. To say, "I am wealthy," while inwardly feeling lack avails nothing. But to feel the truth of wealth, even before evidence, is to impress it upon the subconscious. The subconscious, once impressed, expresses without fail. It is the silent builder, the unseen force that shapes circumstances. When you feel yourself already the one you desire to be, you call upon this power to arrange the world accordingly. Consider the sculptor who looks upon a block of marble. To the untrained eye, it is only a stone, but the sculptor sees within it the finished statue. He does not fight the stone, he removes only what hides the form already present. So it is with assumption. The state you desire already exists within you. You need only remove the disbelief, the doubt, the clinging to the old identity, until the new self stands revealed. Even scripture illustrates this principle in parable. The prodigal son, having wasted his wealth, finds himself in want. He identifies as a beggar, feeding on husks. But the moment he remembers and assumes once more his identity as the son, he rises and returns to the father, and the feast is prepared. His circumstances change the moment his identity shifted, not before. To practice this art, choose the state you desire and live in it inwardly. Do not wait for permission from the world. If you desire to be wealthy, assume it now. Feel the security, the ease, the gratitude. Carry this feeling into sleep, for in that drowsy state the subconscious accepts impressions most deeply. If you persist, the world must reflect it. One woman longed for love after years of loneliness. She had grown accustomed to calling herself unwanted. When she heard the principle, she began each night to imagine herself cherished. She felt the warmth of an embrace. She heard the words of affection. She let the joy fill her. Though the bed was empty, she went to sleep in the state of companionship. Soon, a meeting occurred that blossomed into love, and her life was transformed. She had shifted identity, and the world reshaped to match. All men are actors upon the stage of life, but most play the same role over and over, refusing to change the script. Yet the stage is limitless, and every role is available. To play the role of wealth, you must assume it. To play the role of health, you must assume it. To play the role of freedom, you must assume it. No one assigns your role but you. Therefore, discipline yourself to observe what identity you are occupying. Ask, what do I believe myself to be? If the answer is small, weak, or limited, then you know the cause of your circumstances. Change the answer, assume the greater, and persist until it feels natural. The world cannot resist a changed conception of self. The secret has always been hidden in plain sight. The outer world bends itself to the inner world you dare to assume. Life does not answer your wishes, nor your pleas, nor even your labor alone. It answers only to the conception you hold of yourself. The wealth, the freedom, the love, the health you seek are already yours the moment you claim them inwardly and persist in that identity until it becomes the most natural thing in the world. You are not a victim of circumstance, you are the author of it. Change the root within, and the fruit without must change also. Take upon yourself the noble, the rich, the fulfilled state now, and the unseen forces will conspire to bring it forth in your experience. For consciousness alone is the cause, and assumption is the bridge by which the invisible becomes visible.